What if your HOA started cracking down on noise levels? But little did they know, you held the patent for the very technology that could expose their hypocrisy? Stay tuned to find out. Today we're uncovering a shocking tale where a homeowner's simple innovation leads to an unexpected clash with the local HOA. What starts as a minor noise complaint escalates into a full-scale confrontation, where rules are tested and the HOA's own actions come under fire. The story centers on a sound engineering patent that becomes a game changer, revealing a hidden hypocrisy within the HOA's actions. With mounting tensions and a community divided, this is more than just about noise. It's about power, rights, and the fight for fairness. As we explore this escalating conflict, we'll see how one person's determination and ingenuity can challenge even the most established systems. Stick around to find out how a seemingly small action can turn the tide and put an end to the HOA's overreach. It all began when the Oak Ridge Community HOA, known for its rigid rules and control over the neighborhood, introduced a new regulation that would change the way residents could use their sound systems. The HOA's latest rules stated that all outdoor sounds, whether from speakers, musical instruments, or even yard work, had to be kept within a specific decibel range. For most residents, this seemed like a reasonable measure to maintain peace and quiet. However, for David Carter, a homeowner with a deep passion for sound engineering and a patented technology that enhanced audio clarity, the rule felt like an unfair limitation. David had lived in Oak Ridge for over a decade, and his reputation as a tinkerer with sound devices was well known within the community. His small business, which developed custom audio systems, had allowed him to become an innovator in his field, securing a unique patent for a noise-canceling system that could produce high-quality sound without disturbing the surrounding area. He prided himself on the technology's ability to deliver a full auditory experience while respecting noise limits. To David, the HOA's new rule not only felt restrictive, but also unjust, as it targeted his professional achievements, something he had poured years of work into perfecting. As tensions began to rise, the HOA president, Carol Reynolds, became the face of the controversial decision. Carol, a longtime member of the HOA, had always pushed for stricter regulations to maintain a peaceful and controlled neighborhood. Her leadership was firm, and she made no secret of her disdain for what she viewed as disruptive behavior. She believed that sound, even if within legal limits, could cause unnecessary distractions for other residents. Carol's view was that Oak Ridge needed to protect its tranquil environment at all costs, even if that meant enforcing overly strict noise limitations. David, however, saw things differently. He had spent years working with sound frequencies, and his work had always prioritized both the community's peace and the thrill of audio. His innovations were meant to bring the best of both worlds, something that had never been fully understood by the HOA. When he first received a warning from the HOA about his outdoor speakers, David felt the sting of injustice. His sound system complied with decibel limits and didn't disturb the peace, yet the HOA's rules seemed to single him out. He appealed, providing the HOA with details about his patented technology, explaining how it operated within the law while enhancing audio enjoyment. But the HOA wasn't interested in his explanations. Despite this initial setback, David's resolve only strengthened. He realized that if the HOA was willing to dismiss his legitimate concerns, he had to find a way to fight back. This wasn't just about sound. It was about defending his rights as a homeowner and inventor against a powerful entity that, in his eyes, was overstepping its boundaries. As David began researching the issue further, he discovered a loophole in the HOA's regulations that might just turn the tables. But little did he know, this journey would push him into a much larger conflict, one that would challenge the very foundations of the HOA's authority and uncover darker practices within the organization. As the days went on, the tension between David and the Oak Ridge HOA continued to grow. What started as a simple dispute over a parking rule quickly turned into a larger clash over the HOA's authority and David's professional rights. Despite his best efforts to reason with them, the HOA seemed determined to push their agenda, making it clear that they didn't just want to regulate noise, they wanted to control how residents like David use their property. David's first attempt to challenge the rule was met with dismissal. The HOA president, Carol Reynolds, responded coldly to his letter of complaint, offering only vague reassurances that the rule was in place for the greater good of the neighborhood. When David asked for more clarification, he received a second letter citing legal jargon that left him more confused than before. It was clear that Carol, with her authority, wasn't going to make this an easy fight. She refused to acknowledge David's technology and instead insisted that all sound, regardless of decibel level or technology used, was a potential disturbance to the peace. As the weeks passed, David received several more warnings. Each time he adhered to the HOA's noise limit, only to be told that his system, despite being within regulations, was still somehow causing disruptions. In one instance, David was accused of hosting a loud outdoor gathering when he was simply testing a new sound system on his own property. The HOA's notices grew increasingly hostile, and the penalties began to stack up. First, a fine, then a notice of probation, stating that any future infractions would lead to even more severe consequences, including the possibility of being forced to remove his audio equipment entirely. This felt like an overreach. David was being penalized for something that didn't even break the HOA's own rules. Frustrated, David appealed each penalty, citing the specifics of his technology and pointing out how it adhered to every aspect of the HOA's regulations. But every time, the HOA board dismissed his arguments, offering little more than generic responses that seemed to avoid addressing his actual concerns. As they continued to ignore his appeals, David began to feel that the fight was no longer just about the sound system. It was about power, control, and an unjust authority over his property. The escalation didn't stop there. At a particularly heated HOA meeting, David stood before the board to make his case once more. His heart raced as he explained the details of his patented technology, hoping that the board would understand the science behind it. But instead of a thoughtful response, Carol shot back with thinly veiled contempt, accusing him of wasting the board's time. She refused to even consider his evidence, stating that no one was above the rules. The entire room seemed to side with her, dismissing David as a troublemaker. The board's decision was unanimous. His technology, no matter how well designed, was still deemed a violation of the community's peace. This was the tipping point. David could no longer ignore the growing pattern of overreach. His fight had shifted from a personal dispute to a battle for his rights as a homeowner, and now he was prepared to take action. The HOA had pushed him to the edge, and in doing so, they had awoken something he hadn't planned on. His resolve to challenge their authority, not just for himself, but for the rest of the community who might be facing similar oppressive restrictions. The HOA's blatant disregard for David's rights now seemed like a fight he couldn't afford to lose. Determined to turn the tables, David began to dig deeper into the HOA's past. He knew the HOA had always been tight-lipped about their decision-making process, but he refused to back down now. The conflict had escalated to a point where it was no longer just about his sound system. It was about the misuse of power and the erosion of his rights as a homeowner. David felt a sense of responsibility, not only for his own case, but for the many others who were quietly suffering under the HOA's iron grip. David's first step was to meticulously examine the HOA's meeting minutes, which were legally required to be accessible to residents. After weeks of combing through hundreds of pages, he began to uncover a troubling pattern. The decisions made by the board were inconsistent, often contradicting their own established rules and policies. More disturbingly, some of these decisions were documented in ways that seemed deliberately vague, leaving loopholes for arbitrary enforcement. One glaring example stood out to David, a case involving another homeowner, a family that had received multiple fines for allegedly having an unapproved structure in their backyard. The record showed no prior warnings, no attempts at communication, and most importantly, no formal vote on the matter. The fine was levied without any legal basis, and the family was forced to remove their structure, despite the fact that it had been built according to local regulations and was, in fact, within the guidelines of the HOA's own documents. The more David dug, the more discrepancies he found. In the past few years alone, the HOA had issued fines, penalties, and even threats of legal action against several homeowners for trivial or non-existent violations, yet the board had never fully justified their decisions. As he continued his search, David began to see a disturbing trend. The HOA often manipulated the rules for its own benefit, selectively enforcing them in ways that disproportionately targeted certain residents, especially those who stood up to their authority. Then, while scanning through one particularly dense legal document, David found something that would become the key to his case. The HOA had a history of enforcing policies that were, in fact, in violation of state law. Specifically, the fines imposed on homeowners were often outside the scope of what was legally permissible. For example, the HOA had no authority to levy fines without first providing homeowners with an opportunity for a hearing. Yet, time and again, residents were fined without any formal hearing or due process. David's heart raced as he realized the enormity of his discovery. The HOA wasn't just overreaching, it was potentially breaking the law. Armed with this new knowledge, David knew he had to take action. He reached out to a local attorney who specialized in property law, sharing his findings and laying out his case. The lawyer was stunned by the evidence David had gathered, and within hours, a legal strategy began to take shape. The plan was clear. David would not just fight for his own rights. He would expose the HOA's illegal practices and hold them accountable for their actions. As he prepared for the battle ahead, David felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was no longer a personal dispute. It had become a fight for justice. His discoveries had shifted the balance of power, and now he had the ammunition he needed to take the HOA to task. The stakes had never been higher, and David was ready to take them on. With the weight of his evidence in hand, David knew it was time to take action. He filed a formal lawsuit against the HOA, citing their illegal enforcement of policies and the selective targeting of residents. As soon as the lawsuit was filed, the local media caught wind of the story. Headlines began to spread, drawing attention to the HOA's shady practices, and soon enough, David became a symbol of resistance for other homeowners. In the courtroom, the battle was intense. David's lawyer expertly laid out the evidence, exposing the HOA's history of illegal fines, their failure to adhere to their own rules, and their blatant disregard for due process. The HOA's defense, relying heavily on vague legal jargon and questionable justifications, quickly began to unravel under scrutiny. Outside the courtroom, the community rallied behind David. Residents who had long feared the HOA's power started coming forward, sharing their own stories of mistreatment. The case, once thought to be a small dispute, became a major community issue. With every passing day, public opinion swung in David's favor, and the HOA found itself under the harsh spotlight of both the media and the courts. The momentum had shifted. David was no longer fighting alone. As the courtroom drama drew to a close, the tension was palpable. Weeks of legal maneuvering, public support, and tireless effort by David's legal team culminated in a final decision. When the judge delivered the ruling, the room fell silent. The court declared the HOA's actions to be not only unethical, but also illegal. The penalties imposed on David in the selective enforcement of rules were deemed to be in violation of state law. This ruling wasn't just a victory for David, it was a monumental win for the entire community. The judge ordered the HOA to pay restitution to the affected homeowners and mandated a complete overhaul of their governance practices. In the wake of the decision, the effects were felt immediately. The HOA, once a powerful and unchallenged entity, was forced to reevaluate its structure and procedures. A new board was put in place, one that was held to higher standards of transparency and fairness. Homeowners were given a direct voice in the decisions that impacted their lives, and new rules were implemented to ensure that no one would ever face such unjust treatment again. But the impact of the case extended far beyond the immediate community. The ruling set a legal precedent that would reverberate through HOA laws across the state. Other homeowners, inspired by David's courage, began to challenge unfair practices within their own communities. The case became a symbol of what could be achieved when ordinary people took a stand against institutional injustice. Reflecting on the outcome, David couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. What had started as a simple dispute over parking had turned into a battle for justice. And in the end, it was a battle he and his neighbors had won. It wasn't just about the victory itself, but the way it had united the community, proving that collective action could challenge even the most entrenched powers. The HOA, now more accountable and transparent, would have to operate under the watchful eye of the community, ensuring that their voice would always be heard. For David, the fight wasn't just about the parking rules. It was about standing up for what was right, challenging authority when it oversteps its bounds, and showing that one person's determination can bring about change. This was a victory not only for him, but for anyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of authority. It served as a powerful reminder that when people come together and fight for justice, even the most formidable systems can be brought to their knees. The battle may have been won, but the lessons learned would resonate for years to come. David's story serves as a powerful reminder of the strength one person can have when they challenge injustice. It's a testament to the fact that no matter how powerful or seemingly untouchable an institution may be, with the right tools, knowledge, and determination, change is possible. His victory over the HOA was not just about a single dispute. It was about standing up for fairness, fighting for the collective rights of a community, and proving that systemic abuse cannot go unchecked. In situations like David's, many would have felt overwhelmed or defeated by the complexity of the rules, the power of the HOA, or the fear of retaliation. Yet David's refusal to back down was the key to his success. He not only found a way to fight back, but he also empowered others in his community to join him in demanding better. His story is proof that when individuals unite and take a stand, they can influence not just local systems, but broader societal norms and legal precedents. The message here is clear. Knowledge is power. David's legal research and strategic use of evidence played a pivotal role in overturning the HOA's control. It wasn't just his legal expertise. It was his willingness to stand firm against wrongdoing, no matter how difficult the journey. The victory wasn't solely about individual gain. It was about the greater good, ensuring fairness, and providing hope to those who feel powerless in the face of injustice. David's journey emphasizes that we all have the ability to change the systems that affect us. Even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, with courage, persistence, and solidarity, we can challenge the status quo and fight for a fairer, more just world. This isn't just David's victory, it's a victory for anyone who believes that their voice can spark change. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about the battles that everyday people face against unfair systems, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss our weekly videos. We dive deep into real-life stories where individuals fight for justice and create change. We love hearing from our community. So if you've ever had to stand up against something unfair, whether it's with an HOA, a company, or any authority figure, share your experience in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going and inspire others who might be facing similar challenges. Remember, your support helps us continue to bring these powerful stories to light. If you found this video inspiring, like it, share it with friends or anyone you think might benefit from hearing how one person can make a big difference. Together, we can create a space where we support each other and help each other overcome obstacles, no matter how big they may seem. So, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, and let's keep the momentum going.